What is going on YouTube? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video I'm going to try and go over the Pixar theory. Now the Pixar theory is basically this: all of the movies within Pixar are connected in one giant universe. And how that universe works is definitely different from ours. Or starts out with Elemental and it ends with Monsters Inc. or Brave, depending on how you look at it. Time travel is a big important part of this, and it's kind of like all looped back into one another. So I'm going to start a three-part video series where I just go over the Pixar theory. So we're going to start this video with prehistory. So this is going to go from Elemental up to Brave. And if you guys want to see modern times and then future times, join me in these next two videos coming out within the following weeks. So the Pixar timeline basically looks like this. As I said, it starts with Elemental at the top and then it works down to Brave, but that's where we get into our time loop. So what I mean by this time loop is certain events kind of loop back around. And what you guys need to know about the Pixar theory is there's three major players that come along in this whole theory: humans, technology, and animals. And throughout this whole thing, we're going to explore how all of them have interacted, each one taking dominance over the other at certain points. So the first bit of events that happen within the Pixar timeline is actually in the show Elemental. Now, in Elemental, we actually see the basic elements coming together. So the basic elements within the Pixar universe are earth, wind, water, and fire. Now, all of these kind of incorporate other things, like fire can create glass, earth can involve the trees and the land and things. Air is essentially all things to do with that, and water can do everything that you would think water can do. But now what we see in Elemental is the elements coming together. So with the elements coming together, in particular in Elemental, the water and fire element, is they come together and they actually can create a new element through their shared love of one another in the movie. Now, this brings us the building blocks of the rest of the Pixar universe. This is the creation of this universe we are seeing played out through this story. And with them all finally coming together, it's what it allows this world to expand into this great universe that we're actually going to finish going over. But now, the next thing we see going into the Pixar timeline is actually the prehistory in the Good Dinosaur. Now, the one defining thing that happens in the Good Dinosaur that separates the Pixar world from our world after Elemental is the asteroid that would normally have taken out the dinosaurs. It just straight up misses. So we don't really see what causes it to miss. It's just more of like a what if the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs and caused their extinction missed. So we witness the asteroid missing, and then there's a big time jump all the way up to what we would probably consider to be kind of Western-ish times, where the dinosaurs have now evolved to the point where they don't look like their ancestors did. They've changed a little bit, but they don't really change all that much because they are, like, in essence, reptiles, birds, and they haven't changed all that much throughout their entire history. So it makes sense the dinosaurs wouldn't have changed all that much. But what we do see is that they have developed all the way up to the point of agriculture and actually domesticating other animals. But what also happens within the Good Dinosaur is we see that human beings have actually still managed to evolve. But now what they've done is, though, is they have evolved later on than in this universe than we would have in our universe, because the dinosaurs have had time to evolve all the way up to a certain point, which means humans are actually a little bit back on the evolutionary scale, with, you know, the human and the Good Dinosaur being what I would consider to be probably like Neanderthal, early Homo sapien level of intelligence. And we do see, however, that the humans are actually doing better than the dinosaurs are. So in the Good Dinosaur, you see the dinosaurs are inevitably going extinct. They're having crop shortages. We don't see the big herds of dinosaur that you would expect to see. You even see in the pet collector, who is a Styracosaurus, is actually scared because he's all by himself. So he's collecting these other animals to kind of like measure himself out and keep himself safe. And you actually have dinosaurs that have gone so far as to actually start stealing cattle or the buffalo, bison. I'm not sure exactly what they were in the movie, but they're actually trying to steal these from the T-Rexes, which are the raptor dinosaurs. They're trying to steal their food because they just don't have any. The pterosaurs are actually following this storm, which is going around. They're staying in the eye of the storm, and they're basically just picking off all of these animals that the storm is killing because the storm provides. But that actually gives us a clue as to what is taking out the dinosaurs. There is a climate shift that is happening within the Good Dinosaur. And the climate with these storms is probably what's taking out the dinosaurs. and probably causing droughts in other places. Rivers are probably drying up. The dinosaurs are not doing well. But what is doing well and what is very capable of surviving in this new world are the humans. And this is really where we see the shift with the humans versus the dinosaurs. Now, obviously, dinosaurs do inevitably go extinct to a point, and we'll get to that later. They still had an incredible run, but this was kind of the end of the animals. They never really make it back to the top on the scale of the world. Their time on top pretty much ends with the dinosaurs. But not all of them go extinct, because we do see later on in the timeline that Kevin from Up, which is essentially a extinct bird, has managed to survive. So some things probably continued on, but with the good dinosaur pushing back the evolution of everything on the planet, this means that animals are actually going to be able to be more intelligent throughout this entire universe than they would be otherwise, because they've had more time to evolve. But it did set the human clock back a little bit, and by that, really, I guess it means it pushed it further on into the future. So, like, for instance, as you guys see on the screen, like Incredibles takes place in 1950, but that's not wouldn't line up with the 1950 of our time. It was because it's going to be further along in the future. But inevitably, the dinosaurs do end up full going extinct, and that leads us into the next show in this series, which is actually Brave. Now, there is a big jump here between dinosaurs, obviously, and medieval Scotland. In Brave, we get one more very important thing here, and that is the introduction of magic to the Pixar universe. So we see magic pretty much in the form of the witch and the will-o'-the-wisp and the bears, but primarily Brave follows the story of Merida, someone who is trying to change her fate because she is a princess that does not want to be tied to a prince. She wants to do things her own way. She doesn't want to do things the traditional way, and that's causing a bit of a strife between her and her mom, who is very traditional. But she doesn't want what her mom wants for her. She does kind of accept it in the end, but her mom more accepts her and letting her choose her own path. But in the process of figuring this out, Merida meets the witch. Now, the witch can be two characters, okay? She could just be a witch, or she could be Boo from Monsters Inc. And the theory goes here that Boo has figured out how to travel through time. And we can make this connection because the witch uses doors in her magic. And the only other time in the Pixar universe we see doors being extremely important is in Monsters Inc., where they are using doors to travel to the human world. Now, that could be its own form of magic, but the theory goes here that Boo has figured out how to go through doors looking for Sully, so she has discovered magic. So she's kind of created her own little loop back here, and I'll explain more about that whenever we get to Monsters Inc. But basically, Merida goes to the witch looking for a spell to change her fate. The witch has only cast this spell one other time, and that was with the brother. So, but the brother did not have the family that Merida had, so he ends up actually killing all of his brothers and dooming himself to life as a bear, aka Mordu. But Merida, through her love of her mother and her understanding her forgiveness, actually manages to break the spell and change her mother and her brothers back from the bears to their human forms. And following along with all that is she is being led to her path by the will-o'-the-wisp, or spirits that are guiding her to her fate. And we know they're spirits because we see the brother Mordu turn into a wisp after he is ultimately defeated in the end, and his spirit is set free. But what this is this is the introduction of magic into the Pixar universe, and this should open the door for the next movie, which is canonically in the timeline, that being The Incredibles. Bringing magic into the Pixar universe from the future almost sort of makes sense, or having, since the world has changed enough at this point to where magic has come into existence on its own. But we do get other examples of magic further down in the Pixar timeline. So we'll be able to go over magic and how it sort of works in the Pixar universe more or less when we get to Onward. So please stay in tune for that, and that should be video number 3. But where we're sitting at right now is we have animals have hit their peak with the dinosaurs, but also extended their evolution and their intelligence, which can ultimately lead them into modern day. Now, they won't stay this intelligent forever. They'll definitely fall back into the scale. But through their connection to humans and to humans' magic, they will retain their abilities to push forwards. And the further away from humans they are, the more they tend to keep their intelligence within the Pixar universe. But bringing magic into the Pixar world is what opens up this entire possibility for this theory, and it's going to be fun to explore this in further in these next couple videos. But for right now, guys, that's where I'm leaving you off. We've had the creation of the universe, we've had the dinosaurs, and what's pushed this world into its own timeline and its own series of events. And we've brought magic in through Merida and the Will-o'-the-Wisp and the Witch into the Pixar world, or that's just the setup for what's coming next in this timeline. So please, in the comments down below, let me know if you guys have any questions, and please tune in next Tuesday where we're going to be going over modern day of the Pixar theory. So we left off in the last video with the prehistory. We talked about the forming of the world in Elemental. We moved on to the event that shifted this world into its own time in The Good Dinosaur. Then we talked about how magic was brought into this world, kind of from the future, but then kind of not. But we're not quite there yet at this point in the story. But where we are at now is we've caught up to a point where we can go into the modern day era of the Pixar theory. And this era stretches all the way from the 1950s with The Incredibles, and it's going to go all the way around to almost 2020 in Soul. So this will be the longest version of this where we have to actually talk about. And a lot of this is kind of connected, so you really are going to want to go and check out that first video to understand where we are and where we left off in the Pixar theory. But we're going to pick up our story with The Incredibles. So we get another bit of a time jump from Merida's time in medieval Scotland all the way up to the Incredibles and essentially The Incredibles 2. What we're seeing here is the world was and is and will hopefully in the future be full of superheroes. Now, there is a bit of a theory that the superheroes are actually made by the government and they're given their powers by the government, but then their powers can also be inherited and passed down into the next generation, which we see with the Incredibles kids. You know, Dash, Violet, Jack Jack, and they're even getting stronger because Jack Jack is by far the most powerful Incredible, even as a baby, because he has a crazy number of superpowers. But that couldn't last forever. The damage they were causing was too great. People finally decided to sue, and they actually made it where supers were illegal. And then they tried to reverse that in Incredibles 2, and I feel like they were actually fairly successful. But what Incredibles actually brings to the table isn't so much the humans. We see the technology is kind of retro-futuristic in a sense, where they have technology that's futuristic, but still kind of retro in that, you know, it's not like highly sci-fi, it's just like modern technology that can do way bigger things. But the technology is actually the important part because we actually see in the adaptoid that Syndrome creates to take out the supers that AI is a thing, and he has brought AI into the world, and the AI can think and it can go, but they do ultimately end up beating it. Now, the Incredibles are probably the peak of human, because how much better can you get with humans and superpowers? And this is where humans kind of start to level out. We've already beaten the animals, essentially, but what we also now have is technology, and technology actually can make people super. We see that with Syndrome. We see that with the Screenslaver, who uses technology to combat people with superpowers. And though the superpowers do end up winning, we don't really see superhumans all that often the rest of the time through the timeline. We do get kind of like humans with super abilities, but we don't really get to see a lot of what humans can do after the fact on the Incredibles. But technology continues to hide out, and we can get into that here in the next couple of movies that we're going to go over. But after The Incredibles, we can actually get drawn down into here with Luca. Now, with Luca, Luca is really special because it shows that not only do humans, animals, and technology exist in this universe, but so do monsters, particularly sea monsters in this case, okay? And so the sea is one place that we haven't really conquered, especially not at the point where Luca would take place in the timeline. So people have stories of tales of sea monsters that are living within the ocean. And now these could just be one of two things, okay? It could be these were a race of super beings that just adapted to the water in our own little split branch, or just humans that had humans born with superpowers that were shunned and that went into the water. Or it could be that monsters from the future, like we see with Randall in Monsters Inc., that have been cast all the way back into the 1950s and kind of retroactively implanting the ability for monsters to take hold later on in the future. But now, I almost like to think also that this has a little something to do with the fact that magic was brought into this world, because the human or the monsters that are in the sea, these sea monsters, when they go on land, they just look like regular humans, and they can interact with regular humans. And what they might have actually done there is interbreed in with humans, because at the end of the movie, we see that monsters are accepted, at least by this town in Sicily. So now you've got humans with the ability to have superpowers, which could come from the government using the magic that exists in this universe to create superhumans. And then you have these monsters which can have magic on themselves to change into humans, and it just implants into the human's DNA going forwards that humans are going to have magic just kind of within themselves, but also have this genetic quirk that will enable the monsters to take rise later on down the timeline. But we don't have to worry about that for now, because the next major event that happens within the Pixar universe is a movie named Lightyear that a little boy named Andy goes to see and falls in love with the lead character of that movie in Buzz Lightyear. So much so that he asked for that toy for his birthday, thus bringing us into the events of Toy Story and Toy Story 2. Now, here's the fun part about toys. The toys aren't necessarily technology coming to life. They have their own soul. Now, this might not be that big of a thing in the Pixar universe because magic exists, but what is giving magic to the toys? And the idea is it's actually their proximity to humans. And now, up to this point in the universe, we actually have humans which just have built into their DNA a passive ability for magic. And being close to humans in this world has kind of shifted off onto the toys. And as long as the toys are held dear to their respective kids and played with and have their children have strong memories and connection to these toys, it allows these toys to come to life. And they come to life believing their own history until that they were kind of like manufactured with, kind of. So like, like Buzz still thinks he's a space ranger. Woody at some point probably thought he was a cowboy. And they kind of play these roles really well, but ultimately at the end of the day, they do understand they are just toys being played with. But they have a need to be played with. And because they know the longer you're not played with, like Squeaks on Toy Story 2, he's on a shelf and he's actually dying because Andy is forgetting him. And it's human memory and the passive magic that's coming through that is actually feeding these toys and allowing toys to come to life within the Pixar world. And Pixar does kind of throw little hints in there because you'll see toys not quite be in the same spot. So you know most toys in the Pixar universe are coming to life as long as they're being played with. But this is kind of the first step into what could ultimately lead to what I consider probably the peak of technology kind of taking over the planet in cars. But we're going to get to that later on also. That'll be in the next video. Right now, we can actually jump into the events of Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. Now, you kind of got to look at this as just like, well, animals haven't completely gone off the radar. What has happened here kind of is that they live in the ocean, and so not many humans are in the ocean. So they haven't regressed all the way back to the point of just being completely dumb animals. They have retained a bunch of their intelligence to the point where a lone clownfish and his friend could actually traverse an entire ocean to find his son. And then in the next movie, you see that they're actually smart enough straight up where they can full on escape an aquarium and drive a truck. But what we also see here is the pollution of the planet is actually starting to become bad. In just the shallow water off the coast of California, you see what is essentially a dump of containers. And within that, you see that the animals are using these to hide in, using them to create shelters. And this is kind of the precursor to what is just going to be a continuing problem throughout this entire theory of humans destroying the planet that we call home, to the point where we will eventually need to leave the planet. Before all that happens, Pixar has to remind us that magic does exist in this universe. So this is where we get to the events of Turning Red. So Turning Red has magic throughout their entire history, and it's actually really closely connected to bears. So they turn into red pandas. Red pandas are actually not bears, but it's actually kind of similar magic to what happens in Brave, whereas they just kind of took it a step further, making this curse that they call it a part of themselves and a part of their family. But the problem is throughout the years, the technology has advanced, living in relative peace and not war. They don't need their ability to turn into their panda forms to protect their families anymore. So it's went from being a solid blessing to a solid curse, all the way until the events of Turning Red, where the heroine in there decides that she is going to live in harmony with her panda and not get rid of it or not trap it. But what I think this means for the Pixar universe is it's more of just like a reawakening. All humans have this magic within them. Some can activate it, some can't. But this does basically turns her into a super, and it's probably the first super we've seen realistically since the Incredibles and their time before the superheroes actually finally just stopped being mainstream. And all of this is just to remind us that superhumans and magic can still exist in this universe. But what we do have to show is that animals haven't all gone away on land either. So in Ratatouille, we see a rat named Remy who just wants to be a chef, and he is actually a better chef than some of the humans out there. So the animal's intelligence is kind of going up a little bit with, the rats from Ratatouille actually being able to inevitably run a restaurant alongside the humans, and he can cook as good as a master chef can. And what it actually does bring in also is like the critic in Ratatouille is just fully acceptant of the fact that, oh, this rat can cook. And he knows how to cook, and he makes delicious food, and the food is more important than what is making it. And this opens up the door a little bit for us to go into Up, where we see Charles Muntz using dogs that can straight up cook. He said Absalon is the best chef he's ever had. And that is an incredible thing because it rolls right in with Ratatouille where animals are cooking. But Muntz is also using technology to give his dogs the ability to talk. And not only that, he is looking for what is for Kevin, which is a supposedly non-existent bird that could, one, potentially, there is a big theory out there that Kevin's eggs have the ability to kind of extend life, so a magical bird, but also the last remnant of the dinosaurs that you could truly find outside of just regular birds. But I think the big thing we can take from Up is one, gravity on this planet is definitely different. All those balloons could not have lifted that house. But two, animals are evolving along with humans, and humans are starting to look at animals less as these things that are just with us on this planet to our true equals on this planet. And when you combine that with the fact that there are monsters out there, plus magic, plus these superhumans, it's all just kind of going to eventually meld into one strange thing that you can kind of find at the end. But we're going to have to move away from Up for a minute and move on into Toy Story 3. And in Toy Story 3, the toys are being forgotten. Pixar has to remind us here that no, human memory is very important to the events of Toy Story. The toys, to bring these things to life, humans have to play a role. And humans play a role throughout the Pixar theory, essentially as living batteries in an essence. It's the human memory, the human spirit, the human's magic that's allowing the technology, the toys, the animals, all of these things to maintain some level of real intelligence and real workout. And and you can see that this is actually a passed down thing. But what you also see in Toy Story 3 is it's really hard for Woody himself to let go of Andy. He is Andy's toy, and that is actually more exemplified in the events of Toy Story 4. Now, in Toy Story 4, we see Woody kind of go off. He gives up the thing in his voice box that would make him even worth playing with. He chooses to go with Bo Peep and live his own life, helping lost toys or helping toys in general find their children and their forever homes and let their magic continue, let these toys continue to live. But I think what Woody has actually developed here is his own soul, his own being. He is his own person, or he has taken, or more specifically, he is Andy. He has taken over the role, or taken over Andy's personality and has used Andy's magic and Andy's soul to create himself within Woody, if that makes sense. Like, Woody the toy has used Andy to create Andy within itself. It's kind of a weird little mix up, and it's really hard to explain until we get to the next movies in the timeline. Now, the next movies we have sit in our timeline are actually Inside Out, then Coco, then Soul. And I think this was very deliberate. So in Inside Out, we see how human emotion works. And Inside Out 2 is coming out soon. Hopefully that we'll be able to expand that onto our timeline, and I can always do an update video whenever that movie comes out. And I think in Inside Out 2, we get into even more complex emotions. But in Inside Out, we see how our emotions can actually help shape us into what we are. It's our emotions and the magic within our emotions that enables our memories, our core personality traits, which is who makes us us. And then if we move on to Coco, we actually see the spiritual side of that. Whereas if you take these memories and you carry those on after the person has passed away, they can survive, at least in the Hispanic culture here, where they have figured out with the Dia de los Muertos and the Day of the Dead that their memories can actually come back. And as long as there's someone remembers you and your stories are passed down, your memory is passed down, you can continue living on into the afterlife. And you can essentially gain immortality in this way once you've died, as long as your ancestors remember you and put your name up on, or you don't even have to put them up on the ofrenda, as long as your memory and your stories are passed on, your memory and your soul will continue to live on. And it's really funny that the next movie in the timeline would be called Soul. And Soul is all about helping a lost soul go to Earth and gaining, and in this, we see how souls work in the Pixar world. We see them finding what they're meant to do, finding their calling. We see how if you can get in the zone, you can go to this place. And that's, I think, is just magic connecting us to the spiritual world. And it shows us that not all spiritual worlds look the same. We have the pre-life essentially in Soul. So we see how souls are selected and sent down to Earth. And there's no saying that these souls have to embody humans. What if they could also embody toys or inanimate things? And they'll obviously be able to do monsters because there's no real timeline where we're at. It takes place in 2020, but the actual, before life essentially is just whenever it needs to be. So we see in these three movies how souls are created, how they're formed and flourished and flushed out, and then what can happen to them once they actually have passed away. And they're a little bit out of order in the release, but all of these things can eventually come back into one another in these three movies, just giving us, they're really flushed out on how all of this magic is working. Guys, I'm going to have to leave it off right there for this video. That pretty much covers modern times and how all of those movies have connected and one has fed into the other. And in the next video, I'm going to go ahead and go over the future in the Pixar timeline. And that is going to go from Cars all the way up to Monsters Inc. and kind of roll back into Brave. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Did I miss anything? Do you want me to explain anything more and maybe go a little bit more in depth into any of this? And in which case I definitely will. But I need to know what you guys want to see down in the comments. Now, when we last left off on the Pixar 3, we left off with Soul and the modern times. And what this is going to lead us inevitably into is the future of Pixar world. And we are actually going to get to start here with Cars 1, 2, and 3. Now, what Cars shows us is a couple of things. One, humans are no longer on the planet. And this is more than likely due to the pollution that we started seeing way back in Finding Dory. Two, the cars have came to life in the order in which they would have been made throughout the human timeline. So as human 1960s, you would get Cars 1960s, and then they just wake up in order of essentially their make year and their model year with the personalities of the people that owned them. So Lightning McQueen actually has the personality of the human Lightning McQueen. And where have we seen that before in the Pixar timeline? Now, as I went over last video, Woody from Toy Story 4 actually took in parts of Andy's soul and Andy's personality to come to life. Now, he came to life in his own way with his own kind of personality, but I think that's because he had kind of a built-in background because he is a toy, so he kind of already had some built-in personality. But Cars really wouldn't have had that. So what they've done is they just take their original owner's personality, just make it their own. The problem with this, though, is there are no more people for them to draw this power from. So it's the connection and basically the leftover magic of the world that's brought these inanimate things to life, these lifeless things, and given them life, just like the toys, except there's no humans for them to continue drawing this power from. So what does that inevitably cause? It's going to cause the cars not to be able to continue on. And we actually can find that in the fact that they're actually having a fuel crisis in Cars 2. And that's not really addressed in Cars 3, but in Cars 3, we see that they're actually rapidly approaching modern times, or what we would consider modern times with the race cars and more modern cars and modern technology, as opposed to what you would think they should be doing. So essentially, the magic is running out fast, so they're going faster, which will inevitably lead to them making the same mistakes that we've made throughout our time on this planet in the Pixar world, and causing them to just simply further pollute and destroy the planet. And we see all of that actually culminating in Wall-E. Now, in Wall-E, we see that there is this lone little robot who is just continuing to do his task. We see that this corporation, by and large, has essentially monopolized everything on the planet. And we've seen by and large in the Pixar 3 as early as Toy Story, because by and large actually has the batteries that operate Buzz Lightyear. And we see it again in Up. They're the people who are trying to buy up Carl's house in Up. But we see what they've done in Wall-E is they actually had to take it a step further, and they have completely ruined the planet. They have made it so polluted that very few things can survive, except, as we saw in Cars, things from the water, because they are separate from humans, essentially, in this world, and bugs, which we'll get to within the next movie of A Bug's Life. But for now, what we also see is that while humans have been on the axioms and left the planet, AI has now fully taken over the humans. Essentially, it's taken over their lives. It's made it where they literally have to do nothing. It's basically turned humans into its playthings. And how did it actually manage to do that? Probably because it's using humans like toys. So it's basically a role reversal. Whereas it used to be humans playing with toys in Toy Story, now it's now it's AI playing with humans like toys in Wall-E. What we've seen there is by the end of Wall-E is that Wall-E, who has this weird connection to humans and human things, has kind of developed his own soul, kind of like the toys did. And because of his connectedness to the humans' memories magic has actually managed to leach into Wall-E, giving him kind of a pseudo life of his own. And I say pseudo because there's no human for him to draw a personality from. He's just collected enough memories and personalities from humans to where he's created his own. So he has his own life and his own soul, but it's not one person, if that makes sense. But by the end of Wall-E, though, we do actually see the axiom return to Earth, and plant life is actually starting to grow. So the Earth has managed to fix itself. And that's going to lead us really great into the next movie on Earth of A Bug's Life. But before we get there, guys, we're going to have to take a slight jump to the right, because Pixar decided once again to remind us that magic does indeed exist in the Pixar universe. Now, Onward does not take place on Earth. It's very obvious that it doesn't. There's multiple suns. There are mythical creatures. But what we see in Onward is magic was once very commonly used, and everybody who had magic was considered a great help to society in the Wizards, to the point where, by the time of the story in Onward, it's actually just fallen off because technology has caught up with it, which is, interestingly enough, basically what we've seen throughout the Pixar timeline. Magic took a step back for technology, and technology has kind of reached up to its peak that we've seen in Wall-E, with the artificial intelligence actually taking its full control over the humans. The beauty of Onward is it shows us that magic can still exist within the Pixar universe, and it can still be brought to the forefront if one is willing and has the innate capability of actually being able to use magic. And we see that with the main character of Onward, where he didn't think magic was really worth looking into, essentially. I guess they all kind of know magical things exist, but it's very rare. And their dad was actually a wizard, and his son ends up actually being a wizard as well and starts using magic in his everyday life. And that is going to come into play for us in our world when we see Boo in Monsters Inc. But we're going to get there here in a little bit. Now we can jump back over to A Bug's Life, which I believe I can put rather helpfully right here. And what this really does show us is that insects have continued to move forwards, and ant colonies have gotten more advanced. But they haven't been able to take over because the world was so polluted. They really just kind of had to stay in their own little thing. But we see in A Bug's Life is where there's not a lot of humans around, but the Earth has managed to mend itself enough to where you can kind of get a broader span of animals, and the Earth has actually started to fully function again and is moving back to being somewhat stable. However, you can't get rid of that much radiation and pollution. So what has happened is humans, probably through their old monster genetics and monster and magic that has been just innately within them this entire time, just kind of suppressed within their genes, have managed to either evolve into monsters, or animals have managed to evolve into monsters because humans just couldn't take it. Humans probably came back and started rebuilding society, but they just couldn't handle the levels. So one way or the other, I don't like the whole humans interbred with animals thing. We've like recognized that animals are just as smart as humans within this universe, and that was accepted for a while, but I don't think we ever would have gotten to that point. So the two branching theories here are is either humans evolved into monsters or animals evolved into monsters. But either way, we've got monsters. And what are the monsters having a problem with? They are having a problem with energy. They can't get enough energy because there are no humans left for them to draw energy from. The human memory magic is very important within the Pixar universe. But what they have figured out how to do is to time travel back in time through the use of doors to go into human worlds, and essentially through scaring kids, implanting the scares in their memory, steal that energy and take it back to the future, which coincidentally may cause some of the energy crises we see throughout the Pixar theory, but there's not really much to connect that. I'm just thinking if they're taking a bunch of energy from kids and bringing it to the future, it probably is what held back the toys and other things for the most part all the way throughout this timeline. So it's a good little time loop situation here. But how are they making these doors work? Well, we actually get our answer to that in Brave. In Brave, the witch uses doors to essentially just move from one area to another without going anywhere. They go in, it's a wood carving shop, they go out, go back in, it's then her magic place. So never conjure where you carve is basically what she says. So the theory goes here is in Monsters Incorporated, Boo is brought to the future in the monsters world. There she meets Sully. She meets her best friend. She's a very young little girl, but his memory is implanted within her mind. And Boo wanting to see her friend again, because as far as we know canonically, they only saw each other one other time after the events of Monsters Inc. So that was probably the last time Sully ever actually got to see Boo. But Boo doesn't want that to be her last time she gets to see Scully. So what does she do in her life? She goes and starts trying to learn how to use magic. Now, Boo is potentially born about the time where supers exist. So we already have superpowered people. So she knows it's possible for powers or magic to exist within this universe. So the idea is she learns how to essentially have time magic, and she uses that to travel through doors into the past. She can't go to the future because that's not how the door magic works. The door magic goes as long as the connection is there, you can go from your current time to the past and then to your current time. So she can't go to the future to see Sully, but what she can do is she can go to the past in Brave and essentially create a time loop where all of the events that I have just given within the Pixar world can basically rehappen to where she can ensure she gets to see her friend one more time. And this little girl is what creates the entire Pixar time loop. But guys, that is pretty much it. That is the entire story of the Pixar theory as of recording this video. So up on the slate, I do believe Pixar is planning an Inside Out 2, so we'll probably get more insight into the emotions and how they go. But I love how all of these movies, you can trace this connectiveness. Elemental can create the world that can lead to the Good Dinosaur, which can shift the timeline of our planet, which can lead into Brave, which can bring magic into the world, which gives you the supers, it can give you the toys, it can give you the cars, it can give you the technology, and all of these things drawing their power from the people in one big connected thing. And you guys, the most fun about the Pixar theory is it doesn't have to be real. It's just fun to try and make it real. And that's what I challenge you guys to do. In the comments below, let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if some of the things I said don't actually make sense. Let me know what you guys think. Where did I go wrong? Where did I get it right? Would you guys like for me to go more in depth into some of these characters or more in depth into some of these stories and explain some more of the topics that I actually brought up while I was doing this 3-part series of mine? And while you're down there, guys, please remember, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so you never miss another video from me, and I will see you guys in the next video.